Hey, it's Chris. So let's go back for a second here. Before my top 10 list of 2023 comes out, because that'll be coming out soon in the near future, I thought I'd revisit 2022. Talking about this in a completely separate video, talking about 2023's list as a meta, like what I'm seeing trending wise and why I think some of the games that are being thrown out there for 2023 might not be necessarily as appropriate. Like if they're not available widely at retail in 2023, you probably shouldn't have it on your list. It's kind of weird from me, standpoint. If the retail release isn't until March of 2024. Anyway, where are the best games of 2022, right? Now, we can do this however you want, but let's revisit my top 10 of 2022. Again, my top 10 of 2023 will be out before April, like it was last year, but let's go. Now, I did 12 games last year. I did 12 games. I did the 10 and the 2 honorable mentions. Rerank, revisit my thoughts on these. Now, all of these 12 games, spoilers right here at the beginning of this video, spoilers, all of these 12 games are still in my collection. Like when I looked back at like 2020s or 2021s, like last year, all of those games were not in my collection. So overall, 2022 was a much better year for me personally than the previous 2 years, which is good, right? You want to keep these games. That's the thing that bothers me the most about these games, that people are like, these are awesome and these are freaking amazing. These are my top 10 games of this mechanism, or top 10 games of this month, of this week, of the day, of the hotness, or of the year. Like we're talking about is that, when you say, well, did you keep that game? Oh, you didn't keep that game. Was it really that good then? That's, how I judge this. And again, I'm not throwing shade at anybody here. I'm throwing shade at myself, because I don't want to be having games on lists like this that don't stand the test of time. Games that are right for you, that will stay in your collection. That's why you buy the games. You don't buy the games because it's the hotness. You don't buy the games because it's a FOMO. You don't rank them because of whatever other than it's freaking amazing for you. And that's why 2023 is also going to be interesting, because 2023 has a huge spread of games being thrown out there on top 10s. I guarantee you, as the last preamble part of this video, before we get into this, my top 10 is going to look at least 50% different than almost anyone's out there. I'll tell you that right now. Let's go. So, honorable mentions. Again, we're re-ranking these. This is not going to be the same order. So, last year, okay. Honorable mention number 2. I'm not even sure it would make the list if I had to redo this list completely. Wonderland's War. I think it's a fine game. I'm not huge on area control. It's sitting right there on my shelf. And I've got the deluxe chips. The chips are very nice. Very nice. The standees are colorful and they're amazing. And the miniatures are completely throw them out the window. I don't care about the blade. I don't care about the gray plastic chunks. But the gameplay, it just feels like it's missing something. And again, with a lot of these area controls, you have to be very aggressive, and you have a meta, and you have this dynamic of the asymmetric factions of the Wonderland's characters. And so there were some balancing issues that they sort of tweaked post. And the new expansion was really just replacing a deck. So I didn't bother to back that, or even late pledge it from Druid City. And so I said, has that hit the table since then? No, it hasn't, frankly speaking. So that's one that I'm not quite ready to get rid of yet. But it's probably the closest thing on this list that I would consider as well. The dynamics are there. They're pleasant. They're very nice. If I had a group that met very consistently, maybe this one would be higher up on the list, of things that would hit the table more often. But where I'm at in life, this doesn't really line up. And so, again, that's why it's sort of honorable mention number 2, sort of half off the list as well. Honorable mention number 1 is, Soccer Arms. I was a little higher on this last year. Now, again, don't get me wrong. This is an amazing game. I love what Level 99 has put out with this. But this is, unfortunately, also the most inaccessible of my varied 2-player duelers. The Exceeds, the Battlecons, the Yomis, the Wizards of Grimoire, Summoner Wars, right? The recently covered on the channel Singularity from the end of 2023, right? Like all of those mechanistically are easier to incorporate to someone who is new. And this is really, something that is a step up for multiple ways, because you're having the 3 different elements of the Sakura blossoms that you're sort of moving around in the areas, as well as not only playing the dynamic of the game, what's presented to you, but it really has the, I have to metagame even beforehand of smashing these 2 characters together and trying to guess how they're going to be synergistic, or guess how that my opponent is going to do. And so it's even more meta in some ways than the others that I listed in terms of a battle con, which is saying something, because you have to not use just a pre-constructed deck in the first place. And so just from an ease to accessibility standpoint, I have to downgrade it. Not because I don't like it. I think level 99 games knocks these out. I can't wait to get Guilty Gear sometime in 2024. But from this, I'm just having to restrain myself a little bit, because I just can't see it getting to the table sooner or easier than some of those others. So again, it's not going anywhere, but I hate having things that I go, when am I going to play that next? And the answer is, I don't have a freaking clue. So let's get into the top 10. Number 10, War of the Ring, the card game. Love this game. Fantastic. Sitting right up there. And it's just that I was really let down by Ares expansion. With the solo pseudo cooperative expansion thing they were going for with the recent release this year, like, just not at all fitting with what I want of an expansion. Like, I just want a little bit of tiny content. So a little bit of oomph into the decks, a little bit of variability into the decks, a little bit of just some smattering of something else. And it really just didn't give me that. And so I really wanted that expansion. And then I realized what it was. And I said, ooh, never mind. Never mind. Again, not a game that's going to go anywhere. It's the game that is War of the Ring for me in general, because I'm never going to want to own the 2nd edition miniature version, because I would never, ever get that played. But this, okay. As soon as my kids see Lord of the Rings, hey, you want to play a game with Dad? Right? That's what I'm looking at this game as. And although it's a little bit strategy depth-wise not to my wife's liking, she just doesn't like things that require that many levels of, going through the steps and going through the, layering of complications of strategies. But I like it. I like it a lot still. And so that's why it's still on this list. Number 9, again, this is going to be, slightly odd, slightly not odd, because, I've got Guards of Atlantis 2 sitting right down here next to me. And it's a great game, but it's number 9 on this list because it just is so difficult to get played. So difficult. And that will be a theme with another game in this list as well shortly. Because it's more meta, because it has those elements of really best at 4, really need an even player count, really, shouldn't have bought all the expansion content on the GameFound campaign second time around. But I love it. And I said in my review, and I stand by this, that this is a game I'm never going to get rid of. Now, never, big asterisk there. Obviously, there would be things that would consider me getting rid of it. But in the short term, no, I can't see myself getting rid of it anytime in the near future. So does MOBA lane battling asymmetric characters with a mishmash of mechanics in a way that I haven't seen elsewise in similar games. And I've covered a fair number of similar games that do these types of things. Is it best at the 2-player count? No, it's probably best at 4, which again makes it more inaccessible than I would like. If you're going to have me go with a 2-player game round recommendation, you go God Tier or you go Battle for Eternia, frankly speaking. Those are the other standard bearers right now on the scene. But for 4 players and for 2 players who don't think that has enough depth or complexity, now granted, because Battle for Eternia is probably the lightest there, God Tier is still not light, despite what anyone says about it. If they tell you differently, they're not playing it wrong. But then it's Guards of Atlantis 2. So base game value there is fantastically amazing overall. Number 8, again, it's not going anywhere. It's sitting right behind Puzzle Strike over here, and that's Mists Over Carcassonne. I have the German version. It's fantastic. If you haven't played this game, this is probably the biggest slide. Guards of Atlantis, I think, was sitting around 4. I think this was sitting in my top 3, actually, last year. I love it. It's a cooperative Carcassonne. It basically has replaced any other Carcassonne-esque tile-laying game for me, not named Isle of Skye. But it just hasn't hit the table. frankly speaking, because of the gluttony that was 2023's cooperative games. 2023 was a really good year for cooperative games. And I stand by that. There will be several cooperative games in my top 10. There were already several top 10 cooperative games that I talked about on my crowdfunding that I covered that were not yet delivered, that were in the process of, just the campaigns that I, did videos for this past year. So it was just an amazing year, and it just edged stuff out. I mean, that's not even talking about the Spirit Island expansion that finally showed up 6 months late to retail in North America, and I finally got my copy. Thank you, game nerds. So, I mean, it just does something different. I didn't think I would be loving Carcassonne as a cooperative game in a nutshell, but it has such a varying degree of difficulty, and yeah, it's going to be way too random and way too chaotic and way too not enough perfect information for people, but so be it. It does things differently, and it does things in a very nice way that Land versus Sea sort of gave me a slight tasting of in a competitive sense, but now this gives me a better sense of it in a cooperative version, and I love it for everything that it is. So that's number 8. Number 7 is going to be Splendor Duel. And again, this is splitting hairs. This is really tough for me, folks. Splendor Duel, again, it's sitting somewhere, I think, behind one of these games like Beast right now. No, not there. Just kidding. I'm not going to look for it. But Splendor Duel. People poo-pooed this. People looked at this and said, Splendor, oh, that's not a good game. That's a gateway game. I'm better than that. I mean, that's how people look at Splendor still. And that pisses me off more than anything else. If you have young kids, this is one of my biggest recommendations is Splendor, because it's color matching, it's a little bit of math, it's a little bit of resource management, and it's a little tiny bit of strategy. And you get to see the numbers and the adding and the color combinations all in a nutshell. So this is an absolutely fantastic kids game for like 5-year-olds, right? Splendor Duel is kind of a similar shell of Splendor, only it takes all of those things that people critique of Splendor not being originally, and it makes it into a really, really competitive, strategic 2-player game. One of, if not the best, actually 2-player only, not games you can play at 2 players, but 2-player game of 2022, period. I'll stand by that. I'll fight you for that. So I think it's going to last the test of time right now. It's flying under the radar, I think, but a surprising number of people had it on their lists actually for 2022, and on the list of games, of 2-player only games that my wife would like to play and that she remembers and she enjoys playing, this is on that short list, folks. And my wife is not a gamer. She's not interested in, 10-page rule books. She's not interested in anything that takes longer than 5 minutes to, potentially explain, unless she's played it already. So this fits very nicely because it gives some depth, but it doesn't have a lot of the, oh, this is a thick rule book in order to play this game. This is a thin rule book, and the strategy is actually on the board itself in the first place. And that's what we want out of games nowadays, because you have enough 30 or 40-page rule books. So that's why it's easily number 7. Number 6, this is probably going to be the biggest surprise if you remember my 2022 list. Now, this is going to be, again, this is a highly sliding scale, essentially, because I could swap a lot of these out because it just depends on the time of the day. And that's number 6 being Aeon Trespass Odyssey. That was my number 1 game of 2022. Now, why is that? Now, this is the reason why. It's because, again, accessibility. That is by far and away the biggest issue with it, more than anything else. I think the gameplay is fantastic. I would hands down every single freaking time want to play this over Kingdom Death Monster. I don't care. I like the campaign. I don't like the grindiness of KDM. This has less of it. I think this is more dynamic over the 3 stages. I just have more fun with it. And I got raked over the coals by some of you guys in the comment section last year when I did that. Like, this is better than KDM. You don't know what you're talking about. Nah. You know what? Just as I said to someone else, they responded to an old review of mine. Rhymes with Beether Fields. And they basically said in the comment section, they accused me of doing it for clicks, doing it because I somehow had buyer's remorse, and then also that I was just basically blaspheming the game because it was one of their favorites, right? Look, man, your taste is your own. If you liked KDM better than Aeon Trespass Odyssey, awesome. I am glad that you love it that much. If you like Aeon Trespass Odyssey better than KDM, awesome. You know what? I don't really care either way whether or not your tastes line up with mine. The reason I talk about it is because I'm trying to help you find what's best for your fits. So if you want more of a narrative campaign, if you want more of a cohesive, chase down battle, random appearance, but less random sometimes than KDM, if that makes sense. If you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. At the same time, if you don't want some of those overarching elements, some of the narrative keeping track of, some of the other minutia that KDM doesn't have in certain different ways, I mean, that's okay too. It does stand on the shoulders of Kingdom Death Monster. It does improve in some of those things. But, sometimes, again, innovation, sometimes improvement isn't improvement for you. And that's okay. But I'm not going to sit here and, also let you slander because you don't agree with the opinion, man. That's not cool either way. So I love this game. It's not going anywhere. I'm getting waves 4 and 5, or cycles 4 and 5, I mean. But, accessibility is the biggest issue. Table hog, table space, game saving progression. I'd say that's probably the biggest barrier to all campaign games nowadays, more than anything else. More than cost, more than availability, more than exclusivity, more than table space. I would make the number one argument of being the biggest barrier is actually carrying over from one game to the next. And you can say, yeah, they're just little tuck boxes, but you know how many items and icons and tokens and stuff that you're putting away and having to take out and organize, and then you have all this stuff that's hidden and all the stuff that's not hidden and separating those out. I'm looking at Tamashi right behind the camera. I mean, that's the biggest issue I have with that, is sometimes you just want to have all that stuff available so you don't have to remember which pile is which, even though you get little envelopes and whatever else that goes along with that. Envelopes are nice in theory, folks, until you have kids with some of this stuff and you realize how impractical it is from a day-to-day basis. Anyway, love it. Number 6. Number 5, heat pedal to the metal. Again, not because this is a bad game. I think this is easily going to be, a fantastic game for years to come. And I said on my most anticipated retail games of 2024 that at some point we're going to see probably the expansion. And it's probably going to end up in my collection. But it's just a game that just hasn't hit the table very much. And so that's the biggest barrier to a lot of these. I actually really love the card-driven mechanics. I love them. I don't need it to be exactly like Flamme Rouge. I don't need it to have a campaign system or a, series of races that are linked together. There's something to be said of games that just do one-offs. Something to be said of things that you don't need to carry over. Some things that need to be said of just not having enough overhead to make you relearn the rules every single time you play it, even if it's a month or two apart. And sometimes that's okay to have. And maybe sometimes that's also why it beats out its counterparts or predecessors or compatriots at the same time. And that's what I think a lot of people like about Heat Pedal to the Metal. It just kind of gets away from some of the other stuff. And, racing games otherwise, for the most part, have relatively been thought of as a lot heavier than Heat Pedal to the Metal. I need to control the gears. I need to control the individual spokes on my tire. I need to control the speedometer to the mile per hour, ones instead of 10s or 5s or whatever it may be. You know what I'm talking about there. That you just got to have all of these things. Nothing can be chaotic. It's just, ultimate strategery, Euro placement style gaming. And he kind of says, not really. Let's just make it a fun experience and a randomness and a little bit of card draw, and you can buffer some of it. And, here's a couple of different courses as a whole. And it hit home. Hit home with me, too. So that's why it's number 5. Number 4, again, Puzzle Strike 2. From a deck building standpoint, I can't get enough of this. It's overproduced. I don't think the production is actually terribly great. I'm not a big fan of that wand. It's a battery sucker more than anything else. Twinkles nicely, though. It's not really practical whatsoever. I mean, speaking of unpractical things, I've got Life of Amazonia sitting next to me. I've got Everdell sitting down there below that. 2, completely superfluous little cardboard standout things, a waterfall and a tree, respectively, that went along with them that I said, I could do completely without this and take off a bunch of money off the price and just be, frankly speaking, probably happier with that. And Puzzle Strike 2 has that. But at the same time, from a deck building dynamic standpoint of what I love most about Bullet, of shooting bullets, that's going to not sound great in, post-editing, taking these tokens and gifting them after you've cleverly taken them from your damaging potential area and giving them to someone else to ramp up their difficulty on their turn is just satisfying in a way that I just can't otherwise explain, just like it is with Bullet Heart from level 99. And the fact that it uses somewhat similar but also completely different mechanistic approach with a deck building aspect to allow you to modify things, it's just so clever. It's just one of the most clever games, and I can't not think about it nowadays when I think of deck building. Again, it's different deck building, so it's going to turn people off, and it turned my brother and sister-in-law off a little bit, I think, the first time we played it, because it was so different, even though they're used to like Aeon's End, right? It comes with a fair amount of content. The expansion gives it even more, and all of the decks that you're given that you play with one at a time are just drastically different in how you have to then manipulate those gems to pass them along, we'll say, to your opponents until they get knocked out. So I love it. I love that it's, very similar to Bullet. I mean, that's probably why I love both of them in that sense. I guess I just love that mechanism as a whole. So I guess I didn't really think about that before this, but that's why it's number 4 on this list. Number 3, again, this is probably going to be strange, but maybe not, because I spouted this on the crowdfunding campaign when the second time came around, and that's Keep the Heroes Out down here. It's sitting right here below Mythic Mischief. I just really like hard co-ops, and this has the tower defense theme, and I just like the wooden meeples, and it's doing something different. It's a little bit of a puzzle. You get tons of different scenario setups, again, that are all one-offs. The new expansion with boss battling, giving you the ability to battle bosses, but also recruit them on your own team. The asymmetric enemies that you're actually playing as, the bad guys, essentially, that are dynamically different, not only in how they operate, but also the number of them that are at your disposal is unique. I haven't really seen it done much elsewhere like that. So when you combine that with the tower defense elements of things that we haven't seen a lot done elsewhere, that isn't just a puzzle that needs to be solved, but actually a dynamic interfacing experience like a Pandemic done in a slightly different way, it just works from all levels. And so this one is actually higher on the list. This is the highest riser from 2022 to now. So I'm excited to get more content sometime in 2024. And to be frank, yeah, this one was on my most anticipated list too. I'm not just crazy and making that one up. Yeah, I'm right. Ha-ha! Didn't completely screw things up in my memory wise. So what's number 2 and what's number 1? Number 2, this was an honorable mention. This was an honorable mention last year. This was a by the way sort of thing, but it's really grown on me. That's Scout. This is the ultimate pick up, carry with me anywhere, take it to family gatherings. Oh, do you have a game? Oh, yeah, actually I do. Let me just, and that's what this game has in spades, not to, excuse the card gaming pun there, has a ton of just accessibility. I can take it anywhere. I can play it with anyone. My family is used to card games. This is a card game with a circus theme that's prettier than the Japanese version before it got, the aesthetic upgrade, if you will. But it just has those elements too of doing something slightly different, but also doing something that is completely recognizable and understandable to a wide audience. And so then, nobody's looking at me going, what did he just bring? Oh, geez. That's how much that matters to me, folks. This is a game where I think this one's going to stand the test of time, probably better than anything else on this list. I don't mean that for me personally, although that might be true too, almost, but also just community-wide. I think it's that good. I think it's that outstanding. And it's just really interesting to see things like this that really work, that just seem to understand what people want, why people tick the way they do, and to do a slight variation on it that you hadn't thought of that makes you always go, why didn't I think of that? Why couldn't I have designed this? Sort of like The Game, right? The Game. Horrible name. Absolutely fantastic game. Love it. It's a weird sentence. So easily number 2. So what's number 1? Oh, sitting right back over there, Die Wandelnden Türme. Now, the only thing I don't know are the Wandering Towers, for those of you who don't speak my poor German. It is released now in North America from Capstone, and, it's got probably middling Board Game Geek reviews, but I'll tell you this, again, same thing with Scout. This game is accessible to anyone. this game has never yet failed to produce fun encapsulated on a table, no matter what the age. To be able to do that, to be able to be accessible like that, to have the presence while not being overproduced, but actually being functionally important in a game with the towers that you're stacking, that you're hiding your little wizards in, that you're dunking them into the Raven Tower in order to win the game in the end. All of those things, all of those boxes are checked. So, sure, it's totally random. The card draw is totally and utterly unpredictable. You're going to get screwed. There's going to be some take that. There's going to be some revenge. There's going to be some, I don't like you, so I'm going to, you know what? Sometimes those games tell the best stories. And that's what this does, more than anything else. I don't need a story to be read. I need a story to be able to tell again to other people in a community setting. Hey, do you remember when we played, right? What are the games that do that for you? This is a game that does that for me. And that's why this, honestly, being the number one on this list was probably the easiest of all of these rankings as a whole. Because of that feeling when I think about that game, when I play that game, and when I think of how it affected those around me at the table in the first place. The only thing I've yet to figure out, because I'm lazy, is whether or not the little mini expansions that Capstone put out are actually included in my copy, since I got the German version, or if I need to buy those separately, because if I don't have them, well, I'll be buying them very shortly after this video. So I need to get off my lazy butt and go figure that out. There you go. Revisiting and re-ranking 2022's best. I may also, depending on how you guys think and how well this is received, go back and take a look at the meta listing. Someone does a Board Game Geek listing of all of the top 2022 games for all of the peeps that matter and compiles them. And I sort of pseudo did that in another video for 2023's list so far this year. But I may go back and do 2022's and say, one, how does it compare to my list? And then two, where are those games now? Do you hear people talking about those games? Are they still on people's lists? Are they still in people's collections? Because I think that's an interesting thought experiment. Again, not as a judgment, but as a how accurate is our hotness, right? How accurate actually is it in predicting the things that will stay around, not just the things that are flashes in the pan? Because that is what I'm trying to avoid. So there you go. Reviewing and rating my own personal suckiness in terms of figuring out what I like. There you go. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. Over 9,000! That's right. Still saying it. Until we hit 10. Get used to it, folks. It's going to get annoying really quickly. I won't do it every video, though. Or will I? Peace out. See you around.